moving to a panel now, and Doug, you're sticking around for this, but before, or really as we bring the rest of the folks on, this is Doug Drysdale again, the CEO of Cybin, and the ticker again is CLXPF on the OTC and CYBN on the NEO. And there you go. There's your website, cybin.com. Thank you, Doug. And let's move the other panelists on, and we'll keep rolling here. And I believe it's Will Yakowitz, the reporter from Forbes, that's going to lead our discussion here.
Yes, thank you, Patrick.
Of course. I'll let you get to it, my friends.
Great, cool. Well, good to see you, everybody. And you know, like Patrick just said, I'm Will Yakowitz. I'm a writer at Forbes, where I cover psychedelics and cannabis and a couple other beats. But you know, I want to go around and have you guys introduce yourselves. I think you can do it the best. You know, so take 15 seconds, and then we'll get to the main program.
Sure. So I will start. My name is Josh Barch. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Mydecine Innovations Group. So very short, Mydecine Innovations Group is a company focused on the development of first and second generation novel therapeutics revolving around the psychedelic molecules for the treatment of a number of indications, but more specifically for PTSD and addiction. Additionally, we have a very advanced telehealth platform by the name of MindLeap, which we're about to launch 2.0 in the very near future.
Great, thank you. And Doug, why don't you go ahead?
Sure, I was just presenting, so hopefully you all saw the presentation. I'm Doug Drysdale. I'm the CEO of Cybin. We're developing second generation psychedelic treatments for depression and addiction.
Great, and Peyton.
Thanks for having me. Peyton Nyquist, co-founder and CEO of Numinous Wellness. Numinous, we empower people to heal and be well through the development and delivery of innovative mental health care through the access of safe, evidence-based psychedelic-assisted psychotherapies.
Great. Well, thank you. So, you know, my first question, and, you know, just whoever wants to hop in and, you know, we'll go around, you know, obviously, if you have a strong opinion about a question, just please hop in. So, you know, I want to start where, you know, the psychedelic renaissance is clearly underway. And these compounds have the potential to be the most exciting development in mental health since Prozac, right? And I just kind of want to break it down for the audience. Why is psychedelic assisted therapy so exciting, and what's the potential here?
Sure. So I'll jump in. I think, you know, what you're seeing is, like you said, a paradigm shift in the way of thinking and kind of the release of complacency in traditional formats of pharmaceutical treatments that in many cases have been proven to be unsuccessful, for, you know, kind of thinking outside the box and revisiting some incredibly compelling evidence and data that was produced in the 1950s and 1960s that was really curbed due to, you know, political and bureaucratic reasons, many unjustified. So the resurgence of really compelling evidence proving that there's, you know, more efficacious and safer treatments out there utilizing these different molecules is really what's, I think, spurring the kind of renaissance that's occurring currently.
I agree, but I also think we're still in the early stages. So this may be the second wave of psychedelics, but we really are just at the beginning. We're seeing phase 3 data come out of MAPS for PTSD. We're expecting phase 2 data in a not too distant future from Compass and Cybin. You know, we're looking at potentially the first generation products being approved in late 2024 or late 2025. Second generation products coming a couple of years after that. So we've still got a long road to go here. We're still, I think, at the beginning of our understanding of how these treatments work and how best to deploy them. And still a lot of work to do, I think, along the way.
Yeah, I would echo obviously all that Josh and Doug shared. You know, I agree in terms of early innings, but, you know, talking about this psychedelic renaissance, the psychedelic medicines have been used for thousands of years. They're still here. The research continues to be more and more compelling. As mentioned, the most recent MAPS phase 3 data that's come out, you know, science is continuing to validate what's been known in research for quite some time. And I think in a society where the struggles that we continue to have around pretty much all mental health indications continue to rise. So the way that we're treating these different indications and even mental wellness clearly, needs a paradigm shift, and there's a great opportunities for psychedelics to be able to be a part of that change.
Yeah, that's a good point. And, speaking of MAPS's phase 3 trial results, is this a turning point for the industry? Obviously, it was celebrated, but, I think there is some nuance that we can get into. But, do you guys think it's a turning point?
I think absolutely. I don't know if I would call it a turning point, but it's certainly a very large validator for the space to be able to have FDA clinical data that is showing 67% with people no longer showing the indication for PTSD is a staggering and phenomenal number, and I think there's this research is going to continue, and there's lots of conversation about this now industry, and I encourage people to even pull up the study that MAPS did around financial viability for MDMA just for post-traumatic stress disorder. They've done a phenomenal job of ticking the boxes in terms of what's the heavy lifting that's needed to be done in order to integrate these medicines into society right now.
Yeah, no, I think Peyton made some great points, and it is a great validation of all the work that we're trying to do to bring these medicines forward. And it's interesting, Peyton, that you mentioned that the pharmacoeconomics, because when you consider the long duration of action of half-life of MDMA and the pretty substantial psychopharmacotherapy, sorry, the therapy that's associated with it, even with that program, there's massive pharmacoeconomic benefits. So as we were to optimize the duration and optimize the therapy, psychotherapy around it, I think we're just going to continue to see improvements both for mental health and for mental health economics as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I absolutely would agree with that. I think, more than anything, it's a validator. Additionally, you're taking an indication that has really shown no progression in terms of pharmaceutical advancements for a number of years, really since inception, right? In 1980s, it was really kind of classified as an indication. So, it's promising, it's a validator, but it's also refreshing for us to see those results come out and move, the industry as a whole forward.
Well, and I think just to echo off that too, I think it's important to note the population that MAPS was working with. These were not only post-traumatic stress disorder, but treatment-resistant post-traumatic stress disorder. So they've tried all other available treatments and they haven't been effective. And then to continue to post those numbers is staggering.
Yeah. And, before we go too far, what is the paradigm shift here for people who may not know? And, take a drug like, any SSRI inhibitor like Prozac. I'm not sure if people do know, but, the success rate is 30%, which sounds low, obviously, but 30% of people obviously are helped by it. But then, like you guys just mentioned, treatment-resistant populations. What is the paradigm shift here, and what's the problem or the problems that psychedelic-assisted therapy could solve?
Yeah, I think the paradigm shift is enormous. You mentioned a 30% response rate for SSRIs. That's at 12 weeks.
Right. Which is a long time.
Which is a long time, right? And with psychedelics, you're seeing a much more rapid response than that. You saw in the JAMA study that was run out of Johns Hopkins a 71% response rate at 4 weeks. And look at SSRIs over 12 months, you might see a 2/3 response rate. There's still a third not responding. So there's a dramatic shift. But I think it's not just about a response rate. It's the durability of effect. I mean, the opportunity to take away someone's depressive symptoms or their addictive cravings for months at a time from 1 or 2 doses is, for me, that's the real game changer, particularly in addiction. It's a real challenge, I think, for addicts to deal with pharmacotherapy. Many of these treatments for addiction don't really work. And so you're asking addicts to fight their craving, take treatments that don't really work, and to be compliant and adherent. And it's almost an impossible formulation. So you really do need this kind of acute intervention with those patients to give them a breathing space, a clean space to get their lives together. If you can remove someone's addiction or their cravings for 5 or 6 months at a time, they really can completely transform their life, right? Reconnect with family, get back to work. And imagine scaling that across whole communities. You think about the opioid crisis that has taken more lives than the HIV epidemic. And so we could bring these treatments to low-income rural areas, inner cities that have been massively impacted by the opioid crisis. You've got the opportunity to change the trajectory of entire communities and populations.
Yeah, that is a good point. And to play devil's advocate, one thing, obviously a big challenge is access, right? And even access to medications that are FDA approved right now, especially if we're looking at opioid use disorder. I mean, Suboxone, buprenorphine, that is hard to get to populations who need it. As a country, America doesn't really believe addiction should be treated. It's more, go into a church basement and drink coffee and talk about how hard it is, instead of seeing it as a disease, and the first order is, you get on medication. What is the challenge? There's obviously a lot to unpack there, but the challenge of access, I think, is a really big kind of elephant in the room. Especially, analysts say these medication-assisted P combos could be expensive, like 20 to 30 grand a year per patient. Mm-hmm. What do you guys see as strategies around obstacles like that?
I think there's a few things there. I think one, to talk about, even going back to SSRIs, a lot of people don't talk about this, but one of the number one leading reasons people end up in the emergency room is complications with mental health prescriptions. So not only, are they showing less than desirable effectiveness in a lot of cases, but there's a lot of harm that has been caused, unfortunately, by a lot of these medications. So I think to factor that in, and in terms of psychedelics, there's an opportunity for curative intent. Usually when we look at, as you mentioned, whether that's addiction, even the way we treat people with depression or anxiety, this is a label that you're given, and we treat you for the rest of your life. What psychedelics present is curative intent. And I think a more intervention-based approach to using these medicines, you may only come for the MAPS protocol is 3 treatments, and after 3 treatments, no longer 67%, no longer meeting that criteria anymore. I think a little bit of an education and paradigm shift around just how we treat these indications, and allowing people to actually heal these different indications that they have, and be able to live, happier, fuller lives. And, the other side of that too is also looking at, what does mental wellness look like, and how does psychedelics fit into, the ongoing. Very rarely do you see someone have their lives saved by psychedelic therapy or psychedelic treatment and say, okay, got the t-shirt, thanks, I'm all done. There's real, paradigm shift in terms of how people are looking at and treating their mental health. And I think that's an important thing to be included in the conversation for sure. And I think around accessibility is you've seen now studies, whether that's through group, whether that's through a more accessible program. Obviously there's conversations around ketamine, but also with MDMA and psilocybin. How can you have some of that be covered through insurance coverage? How can you have it, in Canada, we have the public healthcare system. How can that be, included in that? And I think to be able to go back to the training and what are the designations that therapists are going to need in order to do that, and push for, that coverage to be under the different registration that practitioners are going to need to have.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things there. First of all, to touch kind of on what Peyton initially alluded to, is the safety profile of these various molecules, as opposed to, comparatively speaking, to SSRIs. They're not even comparable, right? The psychedelic molecules are bar none much safer in use in humans. As it pertains to ease of accessibility, I think that that's going to be kind of a long process. There's a number of things that need to happen along the way. One obvious is reimbursable. It needs to be reimbursable by insurance to make it accessible. But 2, there needs to be improvements made to the molecule that makes it more scalable, so you can treat larger patient populations. And I think really the biggest focus there is controlling half-life and making it scalable, right? I mean, a 4 to 8 hour treatment is not scalable to be able to treat large patient populations, which obviously drastically limits the ease of access point of view there. So all of these things are being addressed in second generations of the medicines. And I think, once that happens, again, it'll be improved ease of access, but it's going to take some time.
Yeah, and I think the second gen is an interesting topic, and kind of improving these molecules and changing duration and intensity. And we were talking earlier about this, and I guess what I want to hear from you guys is like the blue sky opportunity. As I know you guys are working on second generation compounds and novel compounds that can be patented. Is the blue sky opportunity a daily pill, some for lack of a better term, like a non-psychedelic substance, something that doesn't give a patient a psychedelic experience? Or is it something kind of whittling down the time that one of these experiences and the therapy, kind of requires? What do you guys think?
Based on where we're sitting today, Blue Sky would just be getting one of these treatments approved, I think.
Right.
Right. It's great to sort of talk about the hypotheticals, but just seeing most of these treatments being approved would be pretty amazing. And even talking about second generation, where we managed to shorten the duration and speed the onset of action, you're talking about just leaps and bounds ahead of current therapy today. I do think there's maybe potential for lower dose chronic treatments of some molecules for some conditions going forward, maybe on a maintenance basis. But we've got so many hurdles to jump through and so many things to do before we get there. Josh alluded to this, trying to address the challenges from two ends. We're starting from the drug discovery end and the chemistry to make these molecules more suitable. But we've also got to be practical and work backwards from the concept, the perspective of practical patient care delivery. So we're working with payers and providers, looking at practical ways to deliver healthcare and working back from that to design clinical studies that kind of connect with the discovery part of it. You've got to align what the regulators need with how you're going to develop these and deliver these treatments in the long run. So there are many hurdles for us to get through here, given the unusual nature of these treatments.
Yeah, that's a good point. And, there is, I guess, to kind of ground us a little bit, what does the current data say about the potential of these compounds? Like, where are we today?
Yeah, so I think you're going to have to leverage really kind of what's available in the literature, right? So you have some published studies, obviously from MAPS most recently, showing 67% success rates. Now, you also have a number of other studies that have been published that are pretty compelling. You have kind of a pilot study that was done on smoking cessation out of Johns Hopkins. That 15-person study was published, showing astronomically successful results, comparatively speaking, to a Chantix or a nicotine patch, right? So if you're comparing it to the gold standard, these success rates are not even comparable, right? And you're looking at one macrodose, maybe 3 macrodose treatments, or 3 treatments, obviously coupled with many psychotherapy interactions as well. But it's not even comparable to what's currently available out there in the literature.
Yeah. And I think talking, there's lots of conversations around data and the importance of that. I think if you look at what the regulatory environment looks like right now, and you've seen the work that's been done in Oregon and things like that around trying to open up access. And I think Canada has done an amazing job of really looking at the literature, looking at the safety data, and making decisions around opening up access as well. You've seen, Section 56 licenses be granted for people to be able to treat end-of-life anxiety with psilocybin and depression. And then most recently, you've seen Health Canada post their intention to change the special access drug program to include MDMA and psilocybin therapy, which, for anybody who doesn't know what that is, the Special Access Drug Program is a program in Canada that allows for unlimited amount of Canadians to get access to drugs or therapies before they finish going through the clinical trial process. So Health Canada has already put their foot forward saying, we're committed to this. We're open to providing accessibility, and the anticipation is that special access drug program to be changed this summer. So it's coming very quickly, and I think to have that, Health Canada doesn't make just off the cuff decisions, especially around illegal drugs, and obviously that was highlighted in cannabis, but to include that in the conversation around where things are at with data and where the regulators are at in terms of comfort with these different molecules as well.
That's interesting. And this next question, Doug, I'd like to start with you. There are two distinct camps in the industry, as I see it. There might be more, but you have the psychedelic retreat kind of aspect, and then you have pharmaceutical startups. Doug, I know you're a pharma veteran. How do you, and then everybody else, how do you see the industry? Is it more of a pharmaceutical endeavor? Like, is the psychedelic assisted therapy a pharma industry?
Yeah, I think it absolutely has to be. I have no objection to someone that wants to take mushrooms from their backyard. Just like here in Massachusetts, you can grow your own cannabis. You can make your own beer, right? But there's a lot of people that won't want to do that. And there's a lot of people who be fearful of picking the wrong kind of mushrooms or taking the wrong dose or being out of control potentially for hours in an unsupervised environment. So I think the best thing that we can do to bring these treatments to a broad population is to go through that rigorous testing, clinical testing, through the pharmaceutical pathway. At the end of the day, we want these treatments to be descheduled or rescheduled and reimbursable. And I think that's only really going to happen if we spend the time to create that safety and efficacy data that the agencies are looking for.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. I mean, I think that, one of our largest hurdles in the industry is public adoption, right? You're taking something that was so taboo and wrongly portrayed in mainstream media for, a number of years now, and trying to convince people that, that it's not dangerous, and it's kind of been what's ingrained in their heads. So the only way to really do that is through really strong studies and getting that ultimate stamp of approval from the FDA. So I think that it's an absolute necessity to go that route. I also think that the FDA and pharmaceutical approach will then propel a lot of these retreats or clinics to be much more successful than they would be initially as well. So I think that they work synergistically together, and they're both, they both serve vital roles in the progression of the industry.
Yeah, I think the conversation around camps, I disagree with sort of, and there's a lot of conversation right now around, is it clinics or retreats, or is it drug development? And yes, that's where some of the focus and investment has been going right now. But you're talking about an entire shift in the way we treat mental health and healthcare, and everything from technology to virtual platforms to even thwith like sound or immersive experiences. You look at the work that Robin Carhart-Harris is doing right now with, or starting to do with Adam Ghazali down in the US, and there's so many aspects to this space, and it's because it's so large and vast in terms of what we're talking about treating, and trying to shift to, it's going to take a lot of oars all paddling in the same direction to be able to make a significant impact in what we're talking about making an impact in. So I think yes, there's lots of different ways that you can invest or support this space, but ultimately it's the sum of the whole, which is, you're going to need places to be able to do the therapy. You're going to need drugs to be able to administer with the therapy. You're going to need technologies in order to advance it, make it more effective for people. There's just a lot that goes into it.
Yeah, that's a good point. And one of the other elephants in the room here is that we've been here before. Sandoz used to manufacture LSD and psilocybin. The U.S. was leading in research of these compounds. How can the industry avoid mistakes of the past?
I mean, I think it comes down to the industry banding together and making sure that the clinicals that we're doing and designing are responsibly done, that the statewide programs that maybe get issued, like the Oregon Initiative, is done responsibly. because all it takes is the negative press or some bad actors in the space to potentially ruin it for everybody, right? So the good news is that you're seeing a full paradigm shift, and you're starting to see some really progressive thinking in terms of, the majority of the population kind of understanding. You're also starting to see some large investment money propelling it as well, and that's obviously going to, be a catalyst that will, leave a lasting kind of sentiment on the industry as well. But I think ultimately it comes down to responsibility, well planned out clinicals, and really good actors kind of prevailing and being at the front and center of the industry.
I think also, unfortunately, and very much highlighted by COVID, we're at a tipping point in regards to mental health and how people are doing in general. As we've talked about opiate addiction and things like that, pretty much every single one of these numbers, suicidality, they're all, numbers that continue to climb. So we're at a point where, there's deep recognition that though best efforts, the way that we're treating these things are not working well, and we need different tools. And I think, the opportunity now to have validation, whether that's through the FDA clinical trial route, you've now got a social platform where the people are sharing their stories in regards to what psychedelic therapy has done for them. There's broad adoption now, and I think it needs to be much larger than any one particular individual or even one particular group or company. It's bigger than that. And I think if we continue to focus on the people that we're serving, then, this will be able to prevail and be, learned from some of the mistakes that were made in the past.
Mm. That's good. And, one thing to kind of change speeds a little bit, I was talking to Rick Doblin earlier this week, and, one of his philosophies is that, he believes the benefits are not due to the drugs. I feel like a lot of the prism in which a lot of people understand psychedelic assisted therapy is like, oh, well, it's these crazy exciting drugs that make you trip. And, what's more interesting than that? And it has to be the trip. Really how he described it is like, it's the therapy, and it's the drugs that improve the therapy that brings around the real benefit. What do you think of this idea?
Yeah, like you said, definitely seems to be a combination. All right. So there are plenty of anecdotal evidence of people taking these molecules in a kind of recreational setting, and it hasn't changed their lives. Right. And then you look at many different just purely pharmaceutical approaches to this on the other end of the spectrum, where we've attacked, dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, and those haven't really worked either. So it seems to be a combination where the molecules are opening up receptivity, that neuroplasticity that opens up a patient's brain to creating new memories, making new connections, and addressing their underlying conditions. So right now, I don't think we're able to separate the two from the data that I'm seeing.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. Something underlying mechanistically is changing in your brain that's allowing it to be more receptive to the therapy. So, some of the work that we're doing with Dr. Jalen Waddell out of the University of Maryland is really trying to understand exactly that. What is changing in the brain that's dropping the barriers and allowing this, traditionally non-effective psychotherapy protocols to be much more effective. So absolutely the two need to be done jointly and obviously are proven to be, incredibly successful together.
One, I think if you look at, we grateful to be collaborators with MAPS on the phase 3 work that they're doing. We'll be carrying out the phase 3 study this summer with MDMA in Vancouver. And, we've now trained a number of the therapists and talking with them, psychedelics are tools, and, a hammer can be used to build a house, or a hammer can be used to hit yourself in the hand with, depending on the person who's wielding the tool. And I think, as much as technology can really help advance these different molecules, make them, very effective or continuing to hopefully be more effective and have a platform there that can be used. Ultimately, the training of the practitioners and making sure that, ultimately these things, they bring up people's traumas, and there's opportunities there, yes, on a neurological standpoint, to be able to work through these things, but you have to have someone who can help you, be guided through those processes. And going back to the comments around curative intent, you can go to a really good knee surgeon who's going to do a great job fixing your knee, or you can go to someone who, might be at first time on the jobs and bangs you up worse than you were when you went in. So I think the therapies are imperative. And again, going back to the MAPS literature is very, very evident of that.
Yeah. And I think that brings up a good point. Like, training is going to be a major obstacle. And these are some of the most powerful compounds known to man, right? So yeah, it really is, just like any kind of doctor or pharmaceutical product, they do need to be taken seriously and handled with care. I think we really only have time for one more question. I kind of want to look forward for this one. What's next for the industry? Obviously, kind of going beyond mental health, going beyond FDA approval. What are some exciting applications, and what is the future of this industry?
I think what's really exciting for me is just the influx of data that's going to be produced out of this sector. That's really going to open our eyes to what are the potentials of these medicines and how are they the best used. And obviously, as these things progress and these studies progress and more high level institutions come involved and obviously more money flows in, there's going to be some really exciting advancements in the industry that ultimately would be incredibly beneficial for the overall health and well-being of really humans as a whole.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing kind of a maturing of the industry. A lot of startups in the space right now, many of them without a lot of pharmaceutical development experience, and it's a tough process developing pharmaceuticals. And I think as we start to see data come out of phase 2 studies, it's really going to sort of, I think, separate the companies. I do think there's a second wave of capital coming. We just saw MindMed uplisted to NASDAQ. Atai is coming soon. Cybin has that in their sights, and others too. So you're going to see a group of companies with larger balance sheets starting to separate from the pack. I think this likely to lead to some consolidation. And I think the last thing is we're going to start to have more mature conversations around reimbursement, payer-provider partnerships, and really talking about a practical delivery of care. Once we get past that hump, that proof of concept, where we can get comfortable that some of these treatments are actually going to get approved, and I think we're getting pretty close to that, this conversation really starts to shift to who's going to pay for it and how we're going to deliver the care in a practical way.
You guys, I'm so sorry to jump in, but we're a little over time now. I didn't want to cut you off. It was so good. So thank you very much for the time. I really appreciate it. Will Javier Haas says hello.
I say hi.
Well, he heard you just then, so that's awesome.
Nice.
But gents, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. I'm sure we'll be hearing from you again soon. But really, really wonderful discussion here. Thanks again.
Yeah. Thank you, Patrick. And guys, great seeing you.
All right. Take care.